Did you ever hear the tragedy of Data Doll the Lucky? No, I thought not. It's not a story that James White would tell you. It's a Mechanologist legend. Data Doll was a 3-intelligence Mechanologist hero. She could boost, top deck, crank, and then repeatedly pistol her opponents into oblivion. She was so powerful, yet so variable. Well, what happened to her? Another hero, Dash, ascended to LL, taking with her Data Doll's primary weapon, and leaving Data Doll completely powerless. Is it possible to retain this power? Not without the Teklo pistol. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my flesh and blood friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando, and go again, a fabulous cast, and hopefully you enjoyed the intro a little bit. I know I had a lot of fun putting that together, and I guess in the end, that's all that really matters. But yes, thank you for tuning in today, talking the tragedy of Data Doll the Lucky, or whatever I said it was. But, you know, as one of the first Blitz-only heroes who was released in Crucible of War, Data Doll was really more of a meme for like a long time, right? Her 3 intellect was really just too much of a penalty given the limited card pool of the time. And, you know, to be clear, this wasn't for lack of trying, right? There were a lot of folks out there who really vehemently tried to get her to work in the early days. But Data Doll just really didn't have the tools at her disposal to be successful, and thus was just kind of relegated to that meme deck at best, right? But then in Bright Lights, things changed, okay? The Mechanologist support out of that, and specifically the crank mechanic, really changed the environment for her. So now Data Doll's boost and her Teklohard activations could either build board state or convert directly to action points, and sometimes both. And those action points coming off cranked items coming into the arena could then set up a very successful pew 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 with the Teklo pistol at the end of a turn. And in the lower health Blitz format, it only takes a few unblocked pistol hits to put the opponent into what we would call the danger zone, right? So with some list refinement and a lot of practice, Data Doll, I believe, is now a legitimate B contender in Blitz. But headed into Skirmish Season 9, Data Doll's status as a legitimate contender remains in peril. See, Dash is almost certain to LL this season, probably the first week even. And when Dash goes, she takes with her the Teklo pistol, which means that Data Doll goes back to square zero. So in order to understand my argument here, I think it's very important to understand functionally how Data Doll works and how she is successful, at least in today's meta, right? I mean, you look at her, that 3-card hand is a big deal. So historically, the 3-card hand means you don't block as well, but also it's very important because it means you have less cards with which to boost. And that's very relevant when it comes to the weapon selection and all of that, right? Especially if you're not drawing 3 boosts and all of that, right? So what Data Doll is trying to do is she's trying to have at least 1 boost card in hand, zipper hit, 0 to 60, whatever it may be. You do your boost, you chuck a card there, hope to bejesus that you hit, and then you're going to Teklohard activation, making not only 2 resources, but hopefully propagating additional items in the arena on your hits, right? Now, these crank, right, coming out of Bright Lights, we had the crank mechanic, which is huge, right? And we're talking not just boom grenades, very good in this case, but you have your mini force fields, your dissipation shields, I think it is, and all sorts of stuff like your Hadron Colliders, all sorts of fun stuff that not only help her in game, but also when they come in, you crank them. Well, now you have action points at your disposal. You made a bunch of money off of your Teklo Heart, and now you've got a bunch of money to feed your pistol. The other cool thing about Data Doll, she actually has an advantage with her build, I should say. She has an advantage as compared to many of the other Mechanologists, because one of the best ways to beat Mechanologists within Blitz is to just fatigue them. And Data Doll's very hard to fatigue, because if you just sit back and block, she's able to build her board state with the Plasma Purifier, the Induction Chamber. So then, yes, she might only have a few cards left in hand, but it becomes very hard to block 3 or 4 attack, 3 or 4x of 3 or 4 attack pistol shots, right? So you can fatigue her, you absolutely can, but she's a little more robust to that as compared to the other heroes, right? Who are sitting, like Dash, for example, comes in with the Teklo Pounder. Well, you just have to outlast that, and then her value goes down. It becomes easier. Datadol, because she becomes stronger as the game goes, actually has an advantage on that. Okay. So many of you may notice there is a link below. It's to a sample deck list. Now, this is not a full deck tech. I just want to kind of walk through the general concept of how this works based on mine, right? So the whole, not the whole, but a major portion of this is the Teklo Foundry Heart, right? So if you pay 1 into this, you can chuck the top 2 cards of your deck, make a resource for each Met card. Of course, we're playing only Met cards. So you pay 1, you get 2, you net 1 out of it. But you also put 2 cards in your banish zone, which would inherently seem bad, but with Datadol is good as long as you can get what you need, right? And sure, there's some luck in there, but she has quite a bit of help with which to set up her deck, not the least of which is the microprocessor, right? This is her specialization, specifically works for exactly what we're trying to get it to do, right? So you get those in play. You have good stuff like Teklo Pounder, but ultimately what you want to do is utilize these crank items like Boom Grenade, Hadron Collider, you've got the shield in there. And when they come in, so remember, because you're not playing them, they come in automatically with Datadol, which means that you net an action point when you crank it. So you can very, very consistently with her between the boost and the heart and the Teklo heart, you can very easily end up with 2 to 3 action points, which we can just go pew, pew, pew. So go ahead and give that a check out if you're curious. Give it a run. It takes quite a bit of practice and experience to get really good with it, because remember, Datadol is only blocking 3, if blocking at all. So you have to play very aggressive, and then you have to kind of switch in game to go a little more tanky and kind of outlast with your induction chamber. So anyway, that's a breakdown of the deck itself. So with that understood of how she works, or at least what her end game is with trying to crank and make action points and kind of end game with the pistol, we need to understand that, let's go ahead and do this. I'll throw up the weapons that are out there. So we have Symbiosis Shot, and we have Banksy, both of which are specs. Okay, so those are completely out the window. The Teklo Leveler specifically says once per turn action attack. Teklo Blaster says once per turn action attack. Plasma Barrel says once per turn attack, and it costs 2. That one's doable, but its X is really dependent on how many times you've boosted. Now, when you have less cards in your hand, that becomes less effective. And again, it's once per turn action. You also then have the Hanabi Blaster, which for Datadol is basically unplayable because it requires you to boost 3 times, right? Sorry, actually, it doesn't require to boost 3 times. It requires you to play a card with boost 3 times, to be clear here, right? But when you're on a 3-card hand and your deck's full of items, that's not easy to do, right? So in order for her to, and again, let's put this perspective. That's not saying that this is the only way to play Datadol, but it's the only way that she's been successful, right? She's gone from 0 to hero after Bright Lights because of this strategy, and she needs the Teklo pistol. So again, when Dash goes away, because Dash is like, 80 points away, 70 points away, whatever it is, Dash is highly likely to go the first weekend even. And that's why we have the tragedy of Datadol, because she's got herself in a spot now where she's legitimately good, and she unfortunately loses the pistol. So now it's not the end of the world, right? It's just unfortunate because a lot of people have put a lot of work into getting Datadol to work. She's just getting good, gets her feet cut out from under her. Now, where do we go with this? Honestly, I don't think she goes anywhere. I think she's at a dead stop until we get some sort of multi-shot. I mean, that's the advantage of the Teklo pistol, right? Is it's not once per turn. And that's what she needs. Can she run Talishar? Sure. Can she run the Hanabi Blaster? Sure. Can she run the Teklo Blaster? Sure. Right? But you're not doing Evos. Teklo Lever, not Blaster. I don't know why anybody would run the Blaster unless you're the professor, right? But you guys understand, you folks understand what I'm driving at, right? She loses her weapon and she goes back to square 0. So anyway, that is the tragedy of Datadol. I'd love to hear, if you folks are out there, if Datadol folks are out there, I'd love to hear your take on it. You're probably kind of in the same vein as me, but maybe there is some alternative out there I haven't thought of. So anyway, folks, that'll do it for today. Thanks for you Datadol loyalists out there, and go Commando.